Alright, so we're going to put together another video here with another example, and this example actually pulls from pages 278 through 280 inside the book. It's exercise 7.1. We haven't used these exercises much inside the class, but I think as we start getting into some more detailed topics, I think this is a good way for us to have a little bit more practice or see a little bit more in action as we go through. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a site that will include having a menu system, right? So here is the site that we're going to be working with. This is where we sit so far. We want to go ahead and take some of our knowledge of using lists and links and then style sheets to create a navigation menu inside the site. So with no more time wasted, let's jump right in. So the files we're going to be using out of this folder that you can find inside the content section are the CX index, and then that is going to pull from the C6 main.css. So here's our style sheet that we have in place, and so this is going to allow us to build this menu system. So our first thing that we're going to do is come into the C6 index, and we want to put in a nav section that we can put all these links inside of, right? Now, one of the unique things with navs, and I talked about this in the other videos, you can have as many navs inside of your HTML as you want. You can only have one header, you can only have one main, you can only have one footer, but you can have as many navs, as many sections, and as many articles that you would like. So that's one thing that we happen, that if we want to put a horizontal nav and a vertical nav just to put in different locations, we give them some different names. So this is once again is going to start off with an ordered list, and I'm going to write my list items pretty generically. So I'm going to do an href equals $, and I'm going to do this so that I can easily copy and paste and put this in quite a bit. So we actually want to have we want to have about 5 of these for our main menu. By putting the $, it doesn't try to go out to a real page, it just stays on the page. So it's another way that sometimes you can create links to that need to push something else out, like another menu, without actually having to have them linked to a location. So because I made that really generically, it makes it a lot easier for us to create our menus, right? If we had pages for all these, we would go through and we would type in the exact HTML path, the URL that we need to go to that we talked about before, and then everything would work as we begin working on it. So one of the things it told us is that we want to put a class of current on the page that we're on. So this concept will work really well for if every time you make a new page you use the same menu, you'd have to manually type in class equals current. When we get into jQuery, we're going to talk a little bit more about using what we call include files, and we can include the menu onto every page, so we only have to change it one spot, it changes it throughout. You want to be able to use this method in that location. Now the About Us is going to have a submenu, and that submenu is going to have in 4 items inside of it. So we'll come here, this will be our history. So we're just putting together a menu, right? Like no different than we would always have on a page, but we're using it through list items, which a lot of people never, when they first start making pages, they tend to use a lot of tables or paragraphs or breaks and stuff to make menus. And then by the use of list items and unordered lists, it really allows you the opportunity to put together a pretty robust and a pretty easy to follow navigation system. So I'm going to launch this. For some reason my Chrome is being not cooperative. There we go. Got it to work there. So if you notice, we have this list item that comes into place, and you see that it has all the bullets in place as well. Got a little bit of an issue with our past speakers and our contact. Let's see if a refresh will fix that. You notice they're not actually hyperlinking, so let's go take a look at what we did. Oh, it helps if you have it inside the tag. So those are some issues that we just ran into. One thing I'm going to tell you about Chrome is sometimes Chrome, if you make a lot of changes to your style sheets, it doesn't like to instantly take it over. So even if you refresh or you relaunch it and it doesn't go, if you do a Shift F5, that is actually a hard refresh. So a hard refresh will actually tell it to get rid of its information from, some of that cache and rebuild it. For some reason, Chrome is the worst out of all of them. If you make really fast changes to your style sheets, they won't take effect until you do a hard refresh. So there comes some issues with that. So we can tell from this navigation, right? We can see our first tier because that's got our solid bullets. Our second tier has our open bullets. Because of the way the page is set up, that's why we're seeing no margin, no padding, and our bullets going outside, because that's how the bullets, if you look at down by our ticket packages, it is actually the same formatting as those. So that's where we talked about hey, we can make it different for our nav or our article or however we want to go from that situation. So we now have in all the HTML code that we need. So we're able to come out here and go to the main.css, where we'll begin creating the style sheet for the nav section. So just like we talked about in class, we want to make sure we come down here and we put in a logical location. So right here is the end of our header, starts our main. Our nav actually appears in between the header and the main, so that's where I'm going to put it. So I'm going to put the styles just to match what's going on here, the styles for the navigation section or content or however you want to write it. Right, so like we talked about in class, having these logical breaks, having comments inside there makes a big deal. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start just focusing on the navigation box itself, right? So we really don't have to do much there. It's pretty well set up. Everything's kind of where it needs to be. So we're not going to really modify that, right? We're not going to put a border around it right now. We're not going to make gradients. We're not going to do that stuff. So our next step is really to start messing with the content that's inside there, which the first piece of the content is just that UL. So if we do nav menu UL, we can do a list style type and set that to none. That'll take away all the bullets and circles. We're going to give it a margin of 0 pixels. We'll give it a padding of 0 pixels. And I'm going to set its position to relative. It already is kind of set up relative, but this is going to enforce that that's what's going to happen, right? So if we come back over here and refresh our page, you notice that's actually not doing anything, right? This is that Chrome issue. So if I hold down Shift and refresh, we should be getting something. Unless I did something wrong again. Let's go look at our code here real quick. Oh, spelling errors, right? Spelling errors will kill us every time. So you notice I misspelled the word style. It was highlighted. I didn't notice that when I first went out there, so that caused me some issues. I come back, I hit refresh. Now all of our bullets are gone. Spelling errors, punctuation, by far a killer, right? Remember, there's no easy way to have this tell you that's exactly what you did wrong. So you need to really make sure you do different things. Now, one thing that you notice that I do is I do one little chunk of my style sheet, then go check it. The one thing nice about doing, there's good things and bad things about doing that. One nice thing is you know the last thing that worked, right? So right there, I was like, wait, I've only done 4 lines. somewhere in those 4 lines there's an issue. Whereas if I try and write the entire style sheet and then go look at it, it's harder to find where things start breaking. And so one thing I would tell you is I would comment out and then start bringing stuff in, right? So if I was like, well, here is what I just put in, like from here to here, I might comment out all of this and then slowly bring it back in one rule at a time to see what happens. Now the downside of checking it after every single thing is sometimes things you're not going to notice them until you have a few other things in place. This is pretty simple because we know that we had to get rid of bullets. Those didn't go away. We knew something was wrong. So our next step is we want to make this horizontal. So I'm going to do a nav menu UL LI. I'm going to float that left, right? So every list item is going to float left. Here's where you have to know what you're doing it to, because if you just did float left to the UL, nothing's going to happen. Because we're doing it on the LIs, it's going to start bringing it up. So we come out here, hit refresh, and you now notice that all of our LIs go across. It's really hard to tell which one is in the upper tier and the lower tier of our UL, but it's not really a big deal because we know we're going to modify that here shortly. So we have a box of the the nav. Inside the nav is a box of the LI, or of the UL. Inside the UL is a box of the LI. Inside the LI is an element of the anchor tag, right? So there's different things when we talk line elements and things like that. So let's modify that. Let's do nav menu UL LIA. I'm going to set a width of 160 pixels. Do text align center. We have 5 menu items, so if we take 160 pixels times 5, it's 800. That's the width of our body. If you were doing percentages, you could say like, well, I have 5 of them. I'm going to make them all 20%. They'll take up 100% of the screen, and then they will move with everything. We'll work with some padding. Let's get rid of the text decoration. So we're going to set that to none. We'll give it a background, color, change its color to be white, and we will do the font weight to be bold. Now you could change the background color of the LI itself. You'll get a little bit of a different look right now because we have the padding, so that you could change the background color of the LI or the anchor tag. It depends on how you set it up, right? So if we go and we take a peek at this now, you notice that it's going, it got a little goofy here, right? I'm going to show you why. But you notice that we have our links, but then this contact information, which should be on the bottom, is like kind of overlapping and doing weird things. So here's one of the things that we haven't really talked about. We talk about boxes a lot, right? So the nav is a box, the UL is a box, the LI is a box. The anchor tag is not necessarily a box unless we tell it to be a box, right? So when we talk about individual inline elements, they don't take on the same rules as the box because they're structured a little bit differently. If we tell them we want them to display as block, this should help with our situation. So if I come back out here and I hit refresh, now you notice it said, boom, you're a box, right? So now I can add padding to you. I can add all those box elements. So that's one thing to remember. This display block will take a strong, it'll take an emphasize, it'll take anything that we called an inline element. Those are going to be anything we called a block element from the first week. Block elements were things like your paragraphs, your H2s, and things like that. Those are already in block. We now just forced an inline element to act like a block. And so now you see where because this is taking up 100%, it says, okay, I'm floating, so I'm going to go down here. If you weren't floating, it would keep going across the side because it's going to say like, well, there's still room for me, but floats will stay within inside the parameters that you set for it. So we've set together that menu, and we have a pretty good setup as we go here. So one of the things is we want the current we want that to have a color of yellow. So that's just some simple structures. And then now we're ready to get into that inner menu, right? So now we're ready to start taking a look at that inner menu, the inner UL. So we've what we wrote right now is for all ULs and LIs, but now we want to focus on that inner one. So we'll do nav menu UL. Right, so this has to be an unordered list inside of an unordered list inside the nav menu. And I'm going to do a display none that hides it from us. I'm going to set its position to absolute. I'm going to set its top to 100%. This now allows it to be at 100% and everything's going from there. So if we come out and we refresh our page, you'll notice that this turned yellow because that's the current one, and our second nested UL has disappeared. So when that comes back, because we're floating left, it's always going to go in a horizontal manner, which we don't want, right? So we're going to do pound nav menu UL li, and we'll say float of none. So this now overwrites the UL li command, which was a float left, only if it's a UL li. So now that goes away. We're not going to see this because we have them hidden. If you want to, you could always come in here and unhide those, and now you notice that they're stacked the way that we want them. They're not in the right location because of the way that we're doing stuff, but they are there, and we're going to get those kind of shifted over and do some other things. So how do we get them to reappear? We'll do a nav menu UL li hover greater than UL. We'll say display block. Alright, so what's that mean? It means if when we hover over a UL li and directly following that li is a UL, it will display block. Make sense? So I have this purposely set up incorrectly. Mainly because I want to show you an error that a lot will happen. So it goes away, right? Nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens. But we should be getting a box down below here. This is not an issue inside of our style sheet. It's actually an issue inside of our HTML. So let's go back to our style sheet here. It says if directly after an li is a ul. Okay? So if we go look at our HTML, here's our li that controls our about us, and sure enough there is a ul that directly follows it. However, it's not a child of the li. At this point, these two things are siblings, because this is not inside of this. This is a separate thing. So this ul right here is really a child of this ul. So that greater than sign is saying that it has to be a child of the li. Well, what's happening is we are closing our li here, therefore making these two siblings this a child of this. This ul is part of this li. It looks like it is, but it's not. They're siblings. The only thing we have to do is if we move this li out here, right? And then if we would have done that from the get-go, this would have been indented in a little bit more. Now you notice the colors. These two became... So now this UL is a child of this. This LI is a child of this. Now our command will work. So we go back out here. We refresh it. Nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens. There it is. So no scripting, no special things, just setting up our style sheets, which makes this happen pretty quickly, and everything else. We're going to add another couple lines to this style sheet just to ensure things work the way that we want. So we are going to say pound nav menu. If a child is a UL after. So now we're saying a UL has to be a child of menu after something happens, right? So if after it happens, and what we're going to do here is we're going to set a content of empty quotes. This is saying that if after the UL there is a space of any type or just empty stuff, it's going to clear both and then it's going to put a display of block. Okay, so what's that doing? After the UL, after the main UL, it's putting in a space. It's then clearing everything, and then it's putting a block. What's this really doing for us? If we notice, right, everything looks good, everything's working fine. When we refresh it, you don't know anything different, right? Nothing happened. Except for it spaced this out a little bit more. Or like, nothing really happened, but what it could do is it would add those things, and it adds a space without like you having to manually put it. So that's what after the UL, it added the content that we put there. What if we say hello, right? Will we actually see something? I don't know. Sometimes this doesn't work the way that you want it to. And there it did, right? So what's that doing? After the main UL, it is putting a blank space. And that's just, and then it's clearing everything and making it block. So you can always say, like, after something you want something to appear. After an image, I want a word to appear. After something, I want it. So all we're doing is, let's say we take this out, and I'm just going to cut this. Wrong button. I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to relaunch my page. Right? So I'm going to go here, hit refresh. That's what it looks like right there. If I come here, I go back in, we relaunch our page. Here it is without it. There it is there. We don't notice anything. But what if I say I want to add words to it, right? This is just forcing a space in there and guaranteeing that there's a space for the next objects that are coming into it. So if we actually go look now, right? With only 5 or 6 rules inside of our style sheets, we now have this interactive menu. Like I said, we could have set the width of those objects. We have 5 of them, which makes life really easy when you want to do percentages, something that evenly divides into it. So if we come back and we take a look, it did it to our anchor, right? So it's getting really goofy, and this is where some things will not work the way you want. But if I took this out, and let's say I stick that up here, right? Do we get a different result? Now it's saying that our LIs are 20%, and that's why we're running into issues here. Why issues here? Because we wrote it for just a UL there, we would actually have to come down and put that in here as well, right? But is 20% what we really want? I don't know. So now we come in and it's saying like, well, I'm 20% of that thing which has no width, and that's why we're not getting the same results, right? So you have to be careful sometimes with percentages and where you're putting them. So if we undo some of this, and I just wanted to show you because there's different ways to do things, right? Because we're using a fixed layout, right, with the width, use a fixed layout for your anchor tags. Now, if you wanted to come in here, we do have hovers, right? We have a hover down here, but that's just display and block. If you wanted to, you could do, what happens if we do background color, not white, that'd be bad. What about black, right? Let's say we want to change it to black. We're not seeing anything, right? Because it's not working the same way. You can't just like decide, oh, that's what I want, because we can't. You're actually changing it to the UL, right? And so it's not the UL that we want to change. We'd have to put it in the right spot. So just because that says hover doesn't mean it's going to act the same way. So if I really wanted to change that background color, I would have to do it. The best way would be to the right here, because we set the background color on our anchor tag. We would have to do we would have to change it on our anchor. But it's just, this is also not going to be right? Oh, no, wrong thing. Let's do background. And I'm going to try and wrap this up soon because this is going to be kind of a long video. But I just want to show you how we can manipulate things. Remember, being specific on things plays a large role, right? So now if we come here, we can change that background color. But you notice there's an issue, right? You see your border up at the top. For some people, that's going to bother them, right? Because that border is actually coming from that header. And so if you wanted to change that, you would have to go and do that. You can make these hover a different color, all sorts of stuff. So I'll put that section, that file out there that you can play around with. It's not gonna actually, I'll put it out there with both the solutions as well. No, I'll just put it out there with the chapter 6, and so you can always go and type in what I just showed you. On your assignments, you're going to be putting in these menus, so this is going to be a great resource for doing that first assignment. So hope through all the videos this helps you get through chapter 7, and we will start chapter 8 shortly.